Hi everyone. I wanted to tell you the story of how God called me into missions. So the year was 2012, and that year was probably the most difficult year in my life. I was going through a divorce. I had been married for almost 7 years, and then the truth came out that I had been cheated on, and was getting help from church and family and friends, and we were trying to figure it out. I wanted to continue, like, do what I could do to make that work, to make that marriage work, but then it came to a point that it just he didn't want it anymore. And we had a 1.5-year-old daughter at that time. So yeah, I just really wanted to make it work for her to have a family, but that didn't work. So then I was just like trying to do what I had to do to give her some stability. Like, I was just thinking, that's hard, like a lot of change. That's, not what you want for a 1.5-year-old to go through. And yeah, I had planned that baby, that daughter, for all that time, like many years, and I was just devastated of thinking that she would not have her family together, like mom and dad together, like I had always dreamed of. So then I was, yeah, it was hard, but then I was just in this mode of like, let's just do what has to be done, and I'll keep on working, and yeah, just make things work especially for her. And then a couple of months after her dad left the house, I was sleeping, and then I had my phone on the bed. Like, I still had a double bed, and half of it was not being used, so I had kind of a mess on the other side of the bed, and I don't know, some clothes to be folded and put away, and I also had my Bible, and I had my phone. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought my phone was vibrating on the bed, and then I just got my phone and I checked, and it was nothing. And I kept on like trying to see what it could be, and I couldn't find anything. And I would usually sleep really well. I would usually sleep the whole night. My daughter, even though she was just 1.5, she would usually sleep the whole night through. And then, yeah, so I was also working very early in the morning. I had to be at work before 7:30. I was working as an English teacher at that time in Brazil. And then I had to get my daughter ready, and she would stay with my mom at that time in the mornings, and then I would go to work. So I would usually just go to sleep very early and wake up very early and just sleep through the night. But then that night I just woke up and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was like, I tried to just go back to sleep, and then I was still feeling like something is vibrating on the bed, and it's not the phone, and it's not a message, not a call, not everything, not anything. So then I thought, okay, it's not the phone, maybe it's my Bible. My Bible was there next to the phone. And then I just had this thought, like, okay, God, if you want to speak to me, I will just sit up and get my Bible, and I'm going to read until you tell me I can stop. And then that's what I did. I turned on the little bed light, and then I got my Bible. And when I opened it, was like the first page of the book of Ezekiel. So I started reading, like, first chapter, second chapter. When I came to the third chapter, there was this verse that said, "You are not being sent to a people of obscure speech and difficult language." So that was in verse 5. And then I kept on reading, and then in verse 11 it says, "Go now to your countrymen in exile and speak to them." And when I read that, I felt this thing, and I was like, okay, no, God, you're not calling me anywhere right now, right? Like, there's a lot of things changing. This is hard, and I think I just need to keep like a routine and for my daughter, and just, right, you're not calling me anywhere. And I went back to verse 5, and I stopped in the middle of the verse that says, "You're not being sent," and then I stopped there. The rest of the verse is, "To a people of obscure speech and difficult language, but to the house of Israel." But I just stopped there. "You're not being sent." And I was like, okay, I'll stop here and I'll go back to sleep. And I just put my Bible away and went back to sleep. And I forgot about that night for like 2 months. And then that was around October. And then it was December, and we were getting ready for Christmas, and there were some missionaries from my church that were in town for Christmas with their families, and I met them at the Christmas musical we had in church, and I just felt this thing like, I have to go and talk to them. I have to go visit them. And this was actually December 24th, it was Christmas Eve, and I just kind of invited myself to go have breakfast with them. They were staying very close to where I lived at the time, so I just walked there and got some bread on the way, and then we just had breakfast together. And they were telling me about what they do as missionaries in the Amazon forest. They still work there in the Youth with a Mission, the YWAM base in Porto Velho, and they have this ethno-linguistics course, and they have started translating the Bible to one of the languages from one of the tribes. And I have taken a degree in languages and linguistics in the university in my city in Brazil. And so I was fascinated by everything they were doing, and they were telling me about all the other things also that they do at the base and all the missions work they do. And I was just so impressed. And then I remember on that day, they asked me like, "Why are you not in missions?" And I was like, I started crying, and I was like, I don't know. My husband just left, and I have a 1.5-year-old. How am I going to do this? How could I ever do this? And they were like, well, just maybe that's possible. You can bring her. You can take a course with us. She can be in the classroom. And I was like, yeah, let's see. And anyways, that was just before Christmas. And then they wanted some English classes because they were going to a conference in India, I think. So they wanted to just get their English a bit up. And they asked me, I was like, sure, yeah, I'll teach you guys English, of course. And then they came to my house, I think, between Christmas and New Year's. And then they told me, you know what, we prayed about for you and about this thing with going into missions, and we thought that maybe God actually wants you to take a DTS. That's a discipleship training school. That's like the course you take to join the mission, to join Youth with a Mission. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And they were like, well, why don't you pray about it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I can't say no to that, right? Of course I can pray about it. And then, so then that was like just before New Year's. And I remember I went to the beach with my dad and the family that year for New Year's Eve. And I was there, and in this like small town, like by the beach. And then I just felt this thing like I had to buy something like a little notebook to be my journal and start writing what God was telling me. I just felt this thing like I had to go to the store, and I bought this little notebook, and then I felt, okay, 1st of January, I'm gonna start writing the verses or whatever God gives me. And then I prayed, like they told me, like, yes, I'll pray about taking a DTS then. And then as soon as I prayed, God reminded me of that night. And I was like, oh yeah, what was that again? I got the Bible. Let's see if I can find that verse again. And then I read it again. And I was like, okay, I can't deny this anymore. And then when I read it again, I felt that God wanted to use what I had been working with and what I had studied for, which was working with languages and linguistics. I thought God wanted to use that, like when it says about difficult language in the verse, and it talked about exile, like going to your people in the exile. Then I thought about like working with refugees, maybe teaching English, and I had these things in my head. And then at the same time, there was this this like short outreach that was going to happen in my city, in a YWAM base that is in a slum, in a big slum in my city. And they were just going to have like kind of a children's program, like because the children were on summer vacation, right, in January in Brazil. So then the kids were just there, like not having much to do. So that was the plan, to have something fun with the kids during that time. And it was like 2 weeks. And I was really curious to see how my daughter would react to the whole thing of moving into a base and community life, having all meals together. I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to sleep well, if she's going to eat well. But then we did it. We went there and everything went so well. And after that, during that time, I also had other friends telling me like, oh, I think God is calling you into missions, and I have this verse for you, like just leave all things behind. And I was like, oh, I don't know. But then still, I was like, okay, I'll talk to my pastor about it then. So I called and got a time and went to talk to my pastor, and I told him everything. And then I kind of had a plan already. I was like, there was this YWAM base that is very close to my church, and it's also very close to my mom's house and to my dad's house, and even to my daughter's father's house. My ex-husband's house was kind of close. So then, I would be near, and then she could still visit him. The same deal that we had got, like with the divorce papers, like visiting on the weekends, and then I could just keep that. And I told that to my pastor. I was like, they're having a DTS, so maybe I can just do that one. And then my pastor said, well, you're telling me that God gave you a verse that talks about exile and about languages, and I think it doesn't really sound like God wants you to stay here in this country. I think God wants you to go to another country. And I was like, oh, okay. And I thought that made sense, but I was just so afraid of being accused of running away from that situation or taking my daughter away from her father, and what would people say, So then, but then my pastor said, well, why don't you go and talk to the other missionaries that we have sent out from our church and just see if they have any ideas for you. And then that's what I did. And we had one couple from my church that was taking a course here in Norway. And I actually tried other people before checking what they were doing and where they were. I tried other ones, but then didn't really work. But then I checked the place where they were, which was not YWAM, it was another mission. And I thought that was actually, very good. And I thought it was a better idea because I had kind of this prejudice against the DTS. Like I had a lot of friends in YWAM and I loved them. I thought that it was great what they were doing. I just had this idea that the DTS was just this very basic thing of, like learning the basics of the gospel and life with God. And I was raised in church. I had been going to Sunday school my whole life. And I was like, I don't want to just repeat everything again. And so I had this idea. So I was actually excited to go to this other place. It's on the other side of the lake here. And they're kind of like a college that had a missions applied course. I was like, okay, that sounds good. And then, but as I was checking with them, I found this base where I am now. It's a YWAM base called Grimerud. And it was very random. Like I just found their website one day very randomly. And then I was reading a newsletter from other missionaries in Italy. And then I just found this link and I clicked on it. And when I got into YWAM Norway's website, and I remember there were like 8 squares on the screen with the 8 different bases, and I clicked on a random one, and it was this one. And I saw that they had a kindergarten that my daughter could go to, and I saw that they had like a huge focus on families, and that they had this DTS called All Nations, All Generations. And I thought, oh, that actually sounds good, because I know that a lot of the DTSs are usually with lots of young people, like 18, 19, and I was like 28, 27, 28 when I took the DTS, and I had a daughter, and I was like, how is that going to work if it's just a lot of young people, just traveling around and doing, I don't know, things late at night, and I have to put my daughter to sleep, and how is that going to work? And so then I was happy to see this All Nations, All Generations DTS name. It's like, okay, maybe they're gonna be a little bit like thinking more about families and what families need. And then I remember I talked again to my pastor, to 2 pastors this time, and I said like, oh, I found these 2 places in Norway actually. What do you think about it? And they both said like, I think YWAM is a bigger organization that opens more doors in different parts of the world. And I was like, yeah, okay. So then I did that. I followed their advice and I applied and they accepted me. I told them the whole story. I was like, okay, I have a daughter coming with me. They were like, yeah, that's good. And then, yes, I came and it was amazing. It was just so good to go back to these basics that I was just like, I don't need that. But that was actually so good. I guess, just being, like just seeing what God, how God is and his character, and just going back to these basics of, how God speaks to us and how he wants a relationship with us. I think that's exactly what I needed at that time. And then this course is usually 3 months with lectures and classes. And then there are 3 to 4 months doing outreach, like traveling somewhere and doing some kind of work to bless other people, other nations. And then we ended up going to Thailand. My team went to Thailand and my daughter came and everything went super good. And you know what we did in the outreach? We were teaching English to refugee kids. So it was like exactly what God had told me about with that verse. And yeah, it was a very good experience. And then I ended up just coming back. I felt God was calling me into being full-time in missions. Actually, before I came, I forgot that part. Before I came to DTS, so I had a job. I had a pretty good job as an English teacher. I had a car, I had an apartment, and I just sold everything and quit my job and came. And then I just so I was pretty sure that God wanted me to just do something longer than the DTS. That was, it took 7 months, mine. But I just wasn't sure where God wanted me to be. So after I finished my DTS, I went back to Brazil, and I was praying and trying to understand what God wanted me to do, where He wanted me. And then God just opened the doors again for me and my daughter to come back here, and everything worked out with authorizations from her father, from my daughter's father, and everything. So and yeah, the visas. So that's what we did. And then I was working again with refugees here in the place that we called the Mercy House. We would serve free coffee and sandwiches, and they would come and talk to us, and it was such a good opportunity to just share with them, share God's love and God's truth, how Jesus loves them. And there were lots of Muslims actually that would come, that were refugees here, and would come to have coffee with us. So that was a great opportunity, a very good time. At the same time, they called me to work in the kitchen here at the base, because we are a big base. We're also a farm, and we have people working with many different ministries, with family, with teenagers in the churches around here. And we have the courses, like courses for missions, and like the DTS course, and like the leadership courses. And so we have the kitchen that serves food for all these people. And I was working there for some time. I was leading it after a while, and just making it possible for more people to take courses and to be trained to do missions. So that was really good. And right now I am at home with my little girls, because God did so much restoring in my life. So after I came to Norway, then I met my husband here. Yes, Jan Willem. He is from the Netherlands, and I met him here one of the first days I was here, actually. But then we never thought we would be together at the beginning. We were friends for like over 2 years, and then one day it just clicked, and that we could be a family. And yeah, it's been such a blessing that God just put us together, and we have 3 girls now. My daughter that came from Brazil with me, she is 9 now, and we have 2 more, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And yeah, it's been amazing to be able to have a family. I really wanted to have a family and to have more children. And so yeah, in the middle of everything that God called me to do, He also restored so much in my life. I had a hearing problem called otosclerosis, and here in Norway I could get the surgeries to fix it, and now I can hear well again. So yeah, it's so many things I could never imagine that God would do through bringing me here. And there are just details, like this is a really cool one I have to tell. That when we came to the base and my daughter was going to start in the kindergarten, I didn't know anyone here. And then after I applied, I learned that the DTS, one of the staff, or one of the leaders, was a guy from Brazil, and his wife is Norwegian, and she was my daughter's teacher in the preschool. And she lived in Brazil for a long time with her husband, so she could speak Portuguese and English and Norwegian, which were the 3 languages that my daughter needed. So like, not even if I had tried to fix something like that before I came, I think I would never be able to. So yeah, God is just so good, and He's been so faithful during these last 8 years that I have had a job. I've been working as a volunteer, and God has just provided for everything that we need. And yeah, it's just been a huge blessing to obey His calling. And yes, if you have any questions, if you want to know more, you can just write me and I'll be happy to answer and tell you more. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Bye bye.